Serena walked through the grand halls of the diplomatic station, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. The walls were made of smooth, polished metal, reflecting the soft glow of the overhead lights. Around her, members of her own species, the Velari, moved with quiet grace, their silver-blue skin shimmering faintly. Across the hall, the humans stood in small groups, talking and laughing in their usual animated way. She envied them, not because of their technology or their strength, but because they didn't have to live under the weight of fate. Serena's indicator, a small crystal embedded in her wrist at birth, had never once glowed. It was supposed to react when she met her destined bondmate, a person whose soul was perfectly connected to hers. Every Velari had one, and by adulthood, nearly all had found their match. But not her. She was 24 cycles old, and her indicator remained lifeless. It was unheard of. She had tried to ignore it for years, but her parents, her teachers, and even the elders constantly reminded her, a Velari without a bondmate is incomplete. A mistake. An error in the stars. Today was supposed to be a historic moment, a meeting between Velari diplomats and human representatives to discuss a new alliance. Serena was not part of the delegation, but her father had insisted she attend. "You must learn responsibility," he had said. "Even if you never find your bondmate, you can still serve our people in other ways." She had bitten back her frustration and obeyed. Now she stood on the sidelines, watching as discussions took place. The humans were so different from her people. Their expressions, their movements, the way they spoke, it was all so free. Velari were calm, precise, and disciplined. Humans, in contrast, radiated energy. She sighed, turning away. And that's when it happened. Someone bumped into her. Not a light touch, a full collision. Serena staggered back, nearly losing her balance. "Whoa, sorry about that," a deep voice said. She looked up, her eyes widening. The man standing before her was human. Tall, broad-shouldered, and strong, with dark hair and sharp blue eyes. His uniform suggested he was a soldier, but his face carried a boyish charm. And then, her indicator flared to life. A golden glow pulsed from her wrist, bright and undeniable. The room fell silent. Velari and humans alike turned to stare. The air became heavy, thick with shock and disbelief. Serena froze. This was impossible. Her indicator wasn't broken. It wasn't malfunctioning. It had reacted to a human. The man, still holding onto her arm to steady her, noticed the glow. His brows furrowed, curiosity flashing across his face. Did I do something?" he asked, tilting his head. Serena ripped her hand away as if burned. She took a step back, shaking. "No," she whispered, more to herself than to him. This couldn't be happening. Her indicator was never supposed to activate outside her species. It had been scientifically proven. Velari and humans were too different. Their souls were not meant to align. And yet, it had reacted. The human still looked confused, but offered a small smile. "I'm Captain Ethan Voss," he introduced himself. "Sorry if I startled you." Serena didn't answer. She couldn't. Her people were staring. The Velari elders exchanged glances. Some looked horrified, others intrigued. The humans whispered among themselves, clearly uncertain about what just happened. She had to get out of here. Without another word, she turned and walked away as fast as she could. Her heart pounded in her chest, her wrist still glowing faintly. What did this mean? Had fate made a mistake? Or had everything she had been taught about her people, about destiny itself, been wrong? Serena's footsteps echoed as she walked quickly through the long, silver corridors of the diplomatic station. Her breathing was uneven, and her heart pounded in her chest. The golden glow from her indicator had faded now, but she could still feel the warmth of it on her wrist, as if it had burned a mark into her very soul. This was not possible. It couldn't be happening. She had spent her whole life believing that her bondmate did not exist, that she was broken. Now, in a single moment, everything had changed. And worse, her indicator had reacted to a human. That had never happened before in the history of the Velari. Serena reached a small, quiet observation deck and leaned against the glass wall, staring out at the vastness of space. Stars glittered like tiny specks in the darkness, their cold beauty doing nothing to calm the storm inside her mind. She tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was a malfunction. Maybe something in the station's energy field had interfered with the indicator. Maybe she had imagined it. But she knew that wasn't true. The entire room had seen it. The Velari elders, the human diplomats, the soldiers, even Captain Ethan Voss, the man she had collided with, had seen the glow. The thought of him made her stomach tighten. He had looked at her with curiosity, not fear. Unlike her people, he had not recoiled in shock. He had not whispered about her being a mistake. He had only asked if he had done something wrong, as if this was just another ordinary moment to him. How could a human be so calm about something that had shaken her entire world? Serena closed her eyes, trying to steady her thoughts. She needed answers. She couldn't ignore this. Meanwhile, in the human sector, Captain Ethan Voss sat on the edge of a metal bench, his fingers tapping lightly on his knee. The station's medical officer had already checked him. No injuries, no signs of contamination, nothing unusual, except for whatever had just happened with that alien girl. He glanced down at his uniform sleeve, where her touch had lingered. It felt like an ordinary accident, a small collision, nothing more. But that reaction, that golden glow on her wrist, that was definitely not normal. A few of his fellow soldiers sat nearby, still murmuring about the scene from earlier. "Did you see how all the Velari reacted?" One of them said. "Yeah, like she had just touched a ghost." They looked more afraid than surprised. Another added, "Like that wasn't just unexpected, it was impossible." Ethan exhaled slowly, leaning back against the cold metal wall. He didn't know much about the Velari bondmate system, but he had heard rumors. Their people didn't choose partners the way humans did. Instead, they had these indicators that supposedly reacted when they met their perfect match. It was all based on some kind of ancient belief in soul connections. And now, his touch had triggered one. That didn't make sense. Ethan was not a man who believed in destiny. He believed in effort, choices, and actions. The idea that some ancient crystal decided who a person belonged with. That seemed strange. But at the same time, he had seen the fear in her eyes. Not excitement, not happiness. Fear. Why? And more importantly, why did he care? Serena seeks the truth. Serena stood in front of the large circular data console in the Velari archives. The glowing blue interface flickered as she searched for records on indicator activations. She needed to know if this had ever happened before, if there had been any case where an indicator had responded to a non-Velari. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the information. Nothing. Not a single record. Her heart sank. This was truly unheard of. A quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. "You shouldn't be here." Serena turned sharply to see Elder Velian, one of the highest-ranking members of the Velari Council, standing behind her. His silver robes flowed elegantly, and his deep violet eyes studied her with concern. "Elder," she said, forcing herself to remain calm. "I need to understand what happened today." "You already know what happened," he said. "Your indicator activated, and it was a mistake." Serena flinched. "But how can that be?" "The indicators do not make mistakes." "Exactly." Velian's expression hardened, "which is why you must not speak of this further. You will ignore it. You will forget it ever happened." Serena's breath caught. "Forget it." "But this is dangerous," he interrupted. "If others begin to believe that our indicators can react to humans, it will disrupt everything. Our traditions, our unity, our identity." Serena clenched her fists. "But what if our beliefs are wrong?" Velian's eyes darkened. "They are not wrong. Do not question this, Serena. This is not your path. Her heart pounded in frustration. She wanted to argue. She wanted to demand answers. But the weight of centuries-old tradition pressed down on her, suffocating her voice. Villian gave her one last warning glance before turning and leaving the room. Serena stood there, her mind racing. She knew she should listen to the elders. She should pretend it never happened. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. Because the moment her indicator had activated, when Captain Ethan Voss had touched her, something inside her had felt right. And she had to know why. Serena sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her wrist. The indicator was dark again, but she could still feel its presence, like a whisper at the back of her mind. Elder Velian's words echoed in her head. Forget it ever happened. But how could she? Something this important, this impossible, could not be ignored. The indicator did not make mistakes. That was the foundation of Valari belief. If it had activated, it meant something. She clenched her fists. Velian wanted her to stay silent, to pretend that her whole life had not changed in an instant. But Serena had spent too many years living in silence, hiding her pain. She had already endured being called defective for never having an indicator response before. And now that it finally happened, they wanted her to deny it. No, she needed answers. And there was only one person who could give her the other side of the story. The human. A strange invitation. Captain Ethan Voss had just finished his patrol when he received the message. It was an official summons from the Valari Diplomatic Division, requesting his presence at one of their meeting chambers. It didn't say why. But Ethan had a pretty good guess. He sighed and rubbed his temple. He wasn't a diplomat. He was a soldier. He wasn't supposed to get involved in alien traditions or whatever had happened with that glowing indicator. And yet, something about the way Serena had looked at him during their brief encounter bothered him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't happiness. It was fear. And Ethan didn't like seeing anyone afraid, especially not over something he had no control over. So he went. The meeting. The Valari chamber was quiet when Ethan stepped inside. The soft glow of blue crystal lights lined the walls, giving the place an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Serena stood at the far end, her back straight, her expression unreadable. Ethan approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "You called for me," he said. Serena nodded, then hesitated, as if unsure how to begin. Finally, she spoke. "I need to know what humans believe about soul connections." Ethan raised an eyebrow. That was not the question he had expected. "Soul connections," he repeated. Serena's fingers twitched. In Valari culture, we do not choose our partners. The indicator chooses for us. It is based on deep genetic and emotional compatibility. It is something that cannot be forced or controlled. Ethan crossed his arms. "And you're saying mine activated yours?" She inhaled sharply, as if she hated hearing the truth spoken out loud. "Yes." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan sighed and shook his head. "Look, I don't know much about your indicators, but humans don't have anything like that. We don't rely on fate or ancient systems to pick our partners. We just meet people, get to know them, and choose who we want to be with." Serena studied him carefully. "And yet you do believe in things like love, in deep connections that cannot be explained by logic." Ethan frowned. "Well, yeah, some people believe in things like soulmates. Others think it's just chemistry and shared experiences. But either way, we make our own choices." Serena looked away. That was what she had feared. If humans were so different from Valari, if they did not have indicators, then how could hers have activated on one? It was not possible. And yet, it had happened. "Are you afraid of me now?" Ethan's voice was calm, but there was something sharp in his gaze. Serena's breath caught. "No." "Then why do you look like you're about to run?" She stiffened. "Because I was told to pretend this never happened." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "By who?" She hesitated. If she told him the truth, she could be punished. Valeri did not question their traditions, and they certainly did not seek help from outsiders. But something inside her whispered that she needed to tell him. Because Ethan was the only person who would not lie to her. The elders, she finally admitted. They told me to forget. That it was a mistake. Ethan exhaled through his nose, as if he wasn't surprised. "And what do you think?" he asked. Serena swallowed hard. I am not ready to believe it was a mistake." A small, thoughtful smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's lips. "Good," he said, "because neither am I." The warning. Elder Velian watched from the shadows of the observation deck, his expression grim. He had expected Serena to obey, to forget. Instead, she was speaking to the human. She was seeking the truth, and that was dangerous. If the Valeri began to question the infallibility of the indicators, their entire society would change. Their carefully preserved traditions would crumble. Their power over the people would weaken. This could not be allowed. Velian turned sharply and walked away. It was time to take action. Serena walked back to her chamber, her heart pounding. She had done something unthinkable. She had spoken to a human about the indicator. She had ignored the elder's warning. But she needed the truth. She needed to understand why, after years of silence, her indicator had finally activated, and why it had chosen a human. She had expected Ethan to be confused. After all, humans did not have indicators, nor did they believe in predetermined connections. But what surprised her most was that he did not doubt her. "Neither am I." Those words still echoed in her mind. She had spent her entire life believing she was broken, that she was an anomaly among the Valeri. But Ethan had not looked at her with pity. He had not told her she was wrong. And for the first time, she felt that maybe she wasn't. But that thought was dangerous, and she was about to learn just how dangerous it really was. The summoning. The next morning, Serena was called before the Council of Elders. She had expected this. She had defied them. She had questioned what they had told her. And the elders did not tolerate defiance. The council chamber was a vast, circular hall lined with glowing pillars of blue crystal. At the center sat Elder Velian, his gaze cold and unreadable. "Serena of House Phelan," he began, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "You have been summoned because of your actions. Do you know why?" Serena kept her posture straight. "I spoke to the human." Murmurs rippled through the council members. Velian's gaze darkened. "You did more than speak," he said. "You questioned the will of the indicators. You sought answers outside of our own people." Serena's jaw tightened, "Because no one else would give me the truth." Velian's expression did not change, but something in the air shifted. "Are you suggesting that the elders are withholding the truth?" Serena's fingers curled into fists. "I am suggesting that if my indicator activated on a human, then perhaps we do not know as much about them as we think." A sharp silence filled the chamber. Serena knew she had crossed a line. The Valeri had always seen themselves as superior. They believed their indicators were perfect, incapable of making mistakes. If Serena's was working as intended, then it meant one thing. Humans were not as different from them as they had always believed. And that was a dangerous thought. Velian leaned forward slightly. "Serena, you must understand. Sometimes errors occur. You are still young. Perhaps your mind has become confused by your time spent near humans." Serena's eyes narrowed. "You think I imagined it?" Velian exhaled slowly, as if speaking to a child. "I think you are allowing doubt to cloud your judgment. The indicators have existed for thousands of years. They do not fail. They do not lie." Serena took a step forward. "Then why did mine react to Ethan Voss?" Velian's gaze turned sharp, "Because something unnatural has happened." A chill ran down Serena's spine. "Unnatural." Velian rose from his seat. "The human interfered with you, perhaps not intentionally, but their presence, their very existence, disrupts our way of life. We cannot allow that. Serena's stomach twisted. What are you saying? Velian's expression remained cold. You will forget this incident. You will cease your contact with the human, and the matter will be closed. Serena felt her pulse hammering in her ears. They wanted her to erase this, to pretend it had never happened. Just like before. Just like every time she had been told she was different. And for the first time in her life, Serena felt anger, not just at the elders, but at the entire system that had kept her trapped in silence. She would not go back. She would not ignore the truth. She lifted her chin. No. Velian's expression darkened. Excuse me. Serena took a deep breath. I will not forget, and I will not stop searching for the truth. Gasps filled the chamber. The elders looked at each other in shock. Velian's face hardened. You are making a dangerous mistake, Serena. She didn't care. For the first time, she was choosing for herself, and she would not stop now. The escape. Serena knew she had to leave. The elders would not let this go. They would try to isolate her, control her, perhaps even imprison her. She had to act before it was too late. She moved quickly, gathering only what she needed. Her hands trembled as she activated her communicator. There was only one person she could trust now. Ethan. She sent a simple message. Meet me at the docking bay. I need your help. Then, without looking back, she slipped into the shadows of the city, heading toward her only chance of freedom. Meanwhile, Velian watched from his chamber, his expression unreadable. She is going to run, one of the council members whispered. Velian nodded slowly. Let her try. A cold smile touched his lips. She will not get far. Serena moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors of the Velari city. Every step she took echoed in her ears, making her heart pound faster. She knew the elders wouldn't simply let her leave. They would try to stop her. Her message had been sent. Ethan was waiting. She just had to reach the docking bay before the elders' enforcers did. The air was heavy with tension, but Serena felt something she hadn't before. Determination. She wasn't just running to escape. She was running toward the truth. A dangerous path. The corridors were unusually quiet. Too quiet. Serena slowed her pace. Something felt wrong. She turned a corner and stopped. Two armored Velari guards stood at the entrance to the docking bay, their expressions unreadable. Their weapons were not drawn, but they didn't need them. Their presence alone was a message. You are not allowed to leave. Serena's mind raced. She had to find another way. But before she could turn, a voice called out. Serena of House Phelan, stop where you are. Elder Velian. She turned slowly, her heart sinking. Velian stood at the far end of the corridor, flanked by two more guards. His face was calm, but his eyes held a warning. You cannot leave, child, he said softly. You know this. Serena clenched her fists. Why? Why are you afraid of the truth? Velian sighed, as if speaking to someone who simply didn't understand. Because the truth is dangerous. The indicators are not meant to connect with humans. If yours did, then it is an error, one we must correct. Serena took a step back. You want to erase it. Velian nodded. For your own good. Serena's heart pounded. She had no choice now. She had to get past them. Her mind worked quickly. The guards weren't expecting her to resist. The Velari were a peaceful people. They rarely fought. But Serena had spent enough time around humans to know that sometimes running wasn't enough. Sometimes you had to fight. Breaking through. Serena took a deep breath, then moved. She sprinted toward the guards blocking the docking bay. They reacted too late. She slid under one's outstretched arm and shoved the other aside before they could grab her. She could hear Velian shouting behind her, but she didn't stop. The docking bay doors hissed open, and there he was. Ethan stood beside his small human ship, his eyes widening as he saw her. Serena, what the hell is? No time, she gasped. We have to go. Behind her, the guards were recovering. Villian's voice rang through the air. "Stop her. Do not let her leave." Ethan saw the guards. He didn't need an explanation. "Get in." Serena ran up the ship's ramp. Ethan closed behind. The moment they were inside, he hit the controls. The ramp closed, the engines roared to life, and the ship began to rise. The guards opened fire, blue energy bolts streaking toward them. But the shields held. Ethan's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. "Hold on." With a final burst of power, the ship shot into the sky. Serena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They had made it. But she knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The chase begins. As the ship cleared the planet's atmosphere, Serena glanced at Ethan. He was focused, but she could see the unspoken questions in his eyes. "What the hell is going on?" he finally asked. Serena swallowed. "The elders don't want me to know the truth. They don't want me to understand why my indicator activated when I touched you." Ethan frowned. "And they were willing to stop you by force." Serena nodded. "Because if I prove the indicators aren't perfect, if I prove humans and Valeri can be connected, it will change everything." Ethan let out a low whistle. "Well, that explains why they're sending ships after us." Serena's eyes widened. "What?" Ethan pointed to the ship's sensors. Multiple red dots appeared, moving fast. "Valeri patrol ships. They're trying to catch us," he said. "They don't want you dead. They want you back." Serena clenched her fists. "We can't let that happen." Ethan grinned. "Then let's give them a chase." The human ship accelerated, darting through space as the Valeri pursuers followed. The hunt had begun, and Serena knew this was only the beginning. Ethan's hands moved quickly over the controls as the ship darted through the vast darkness of space. The Valeri patrol ships were fast, but they weren't built for high-speed chases. "They're still behind us," Serena said, her voice tense as she watched the glowing red dots on the scanner. "Yeah," Ethan muttered, gripping the controls tightly. "They're good, but we're better." The ship banked hard, avoiding a blast of energy from one of the pursuers. The Valeri were holding back. They weren't trying to destroy the ship. They just wanted to capture Serena. She knew why. If she escaped, the truth would spread. The secret the elders had hidden for so long would come to light. But what was that truth? Her indicator had activated when she touched Ethan. It should have been impossible. Yet, here she was, risking everything because she believed in what she had felt in that moment. A desperate move. "We can't outrun them forever," Serena said, gripping the armrest of her seat. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her. "We won't have to. I have an idea." Serena stared at him. "Please tell me it doesn't involve crashing into a planet." Ethan grinned. "Nope, just flying straight into a storm." Serena turned toward the ship's navigation screen. There it was, an ion storm just ahead. A massive cloud of shifting energy, violent lightning arcs, and unpredictable gravitational shifts. "You're insane," she gasped. "We won't survive that." Ethan smirked. "Maybe they think the same thing. If we go in, they might back off." Serena's heart pounded. It was risky. No, it was beyond risky. But they didn't have many choices left. And if there was one thing she had learned about humans, it was that they thrived in impossible situations. She took a deep breath. "Do it." Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed the engines to full power and sent the ship hurtling straight toward the storm. Behind them, the Valeri ships slowed. They were hesitating. Serena's pulse raced. "It's working. They don't want to risk it." Ethan grinned. "Told you." But just as hope started to rise in Serena's chest, the communicator crackled to life. "Serena, this is Elder Velian." Her stomach tightened. "Turn back now." Velian's voice was calm but firm. "You have no idea what you are doing. That storm will destroy you." Serena hesitated. The storm was dangerous, and the Elder wasn't wrong. If they miscalculated, they wouldn't survive. But she couldn't go back. Not now. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the communicator. I know what I'm doing, and for the first time in my life, I'm making my own choice. Then she cut the connection. Ethan whooped. That's the spirit. And with that, the ship vanished into the storm. The storm's wrath. The moment they entered, the ship began to shake violently. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the gravitational forces threatened to tear them apart. Serena gripped the console. Tell me you've done this before. Ethan laughed, though it was strained. Not exactly, but I've flown through worse. Lightning crackled outside, striking dangerously close. The energy fields messed with their sensors, making it impossible to see where they were going. Serena checked the readings. We need to get out of here fast. Ethan nodded. Hang on. He maneuvered through the storm, dodging bursts of energy and navigating through chaotic gravitational shifts. It felt like chaos itself was trying to pull them apart. Then, suddenly, silence. The shaking stopped. The alarms went quiet. The storm's wrath faded. Serena looked up. They had made it. A revelation in the void. As the ship stabilized, Serena glanced at the scanners. The Valeri ships had turned back. They hadn't followed. She let out a breath of relief. We did it. Ethan grinned. Told you it would work. Serena shook her head in amazement. You humans are truly insane. He smirked. Takes one to know one. Serena's smile faded as she looked down at her hands. Her indicator. She had risked everything for a truth she didn't even understand yet. Why had it activated when she touched Ethan? What did it mean? She clenched her fists. Ethan. I need answers. He nodded. Then let's find them. Ahead of them, the stars stretched endlessly, and somewhere in that vast unknown, the truth was waiting. They just had to reach it. The ship floated in the calm of space, far beyond the reach of the Valeri patrols. The ion storm had shaken them, but they had survived. The silence now felt almost too quiet after all the chaos. Serena sat across from Ethan in the ship's small cabin. Her hands rested on the table, fingers lightly touching the metal surface. Her thoughts were a storm of their own. She had risked everything to escape. She had defied her people, ignored the orders of the elders, and now she was here, free, but filled with questions. And the biggest question of all, why had her indicator activated when she touched Ethan? She took a deep breath and finally spoke. Ethan, I need to understand what happened back there. When I touched you, my indicator reacted. That should be impossible. Ethan leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, you mentioned that before, but you never explained what it means. Serena hesitated. The indicator was a sacred part of Valeri tradition. It only activated when two beings were biologically compatible, when they were meant to share something deeper, a bond. She looked into Ethan's eyes. Among my people, the indicator only reacts when we meet someone who is connected to us. It's a sign of deep compatibility, something that should only happen between Valeri. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So, you're saying that? You and I? She nodded, her heart pounding. Yes, but humans and Valeri are not supposed to be compatible. This shouldn't happen. Ever. Ethan whistled. Well, that's something. The lost records. Serena stood up and paced the small room. The elders must have known about this. That's why they were so desperate to stop me. If the Valeri people learn that we share this connection with humans, it could change everything. Ethan folded his arms. But why hide it? If humans and Valeri are connected in some way, wouldn't that be a good thing? Serena shook her head. Not for the elders. They built our entire civilization on the belief that we are superior, that we are unique in the universe. If humans share something so fundamental with us, it would challenge everything they've taught us. Ethan leaned forward. Then we need to find out the truth. There has to be a reason why they kept this secret. Serena thought for a moment. There is one place where the oldest records are kept. a station hidden deep in Valari space. It's called the Vault of Origins. Ethan smirked. Great name. Sounds like exactly where we need to go. Serena's stomach twisted. It's one of the most secure locations in the entire empire. Getting in won't be easy. Ethan grinned. Good thing I like a challenge. Serena sighed but couldn't help smiling. Humans were truly fearless. The Vault of Origins. Getting to the vault had been difficult. Sneaking inside, even harder. The facility was buried deep within an asteroid, surrounded by powerful energy shields. But with a mix of human ingenuity and Serena's inside knowledge, they had made it inside. Now, they stood in front of an ancient archive, filled with glowing data tablets. Serena's hands trembled as she activated the records. Old holograms flickered to life, revealing long-lost history. And what they saw changed everything. There, recorded in the oldest texts of the Valari, was the truth the elders had hidden for centuries. The Valari and humans shared a common ancestor. A civilization older than both races had once thrived among the stars. It had split into different branches. One became the Valari, the other humanity. Over thousands of years, they had evolved separately, forgetting their shared past. But the genetic connection had never disappeared. The indicator was proof of that connection. Serena's heart pounded. This means we are not so different after all. Ethan let out a low whistle. No wonder the elders kept this secret. If your people found out, everything would change. Serena nodded. The Valari believe they are superior to all other species. But this proves we are not alone. We are not above others. We are part of something bigger. Ethan grinned. Well, I'd say that makes us family, huh? Serena laughed, the tension finally breaking. I suppose so. But then the alarms blared. They found us, Serena said, eyes widening. Ethan pulled out his communicator. Time to go. A new future. They'd barely made it out. The moment they escaped the vault, Valari forces were on their tail. But with one last daring maneuver, Ethan sent their ship into a warp jump, leaving their pursuers behind. Now back in the safety of deep space, Serena stared at the stars. She had spent her entire life believing one thing, only to discover the truth was far greater than she ever imagined. She turned to Ethan. We have to share this with the galaxy. The Valari deserve to know the truth. Ethan nodded. And you're willing to fight for that? She smiled. More than ever. Ethan chuckled. Then let's get to work. As their ship soared into the unknown, Serena knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The truth was out there, and together, they would change the galaxy forever.